Okay, so let's get started. Welcome. So this is Donor Database Experts December webinar. We've been doing these monthly and we'll continue to into the new year. We have some really exciting ones planned for 2026, but if you have any suggestions, you'll be getting a survey at after this webinar. So please send us anything you want us to cover. This is definitely your time, and we want to cover what's helpful to you. I'm Marlisa Post. I'm a database specialist with Donor Database Experts, and I've been working in fundraising and nonprofits for, oh God, over 30 years. And I'm joined by two of my teammates, which I'm thrilled to have here, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Steph, why don't you go first?
Sure. My name is Steph Williams. I have been on a handful of webinars with Marlisa before too. But I am one of our consultants here at DDX, and I oversee our data team, which gets to help clients with a lot of their data projects, clean up things like that. So we've seen a lot of things. And it's always interesting to see how different people use Razor's Edge and how we can get things cleaned up. Before this, I also come from the nonprofit world, mostly operations, fundraising. Primarily in healthcare, a little bit of higher ed too. So that's where I come from.
And Denise.
Yeah, hi, I'm Denise Wooden and I'm a consultant with Steph, and I also lead the gift processing team. So I get to see all the gift processing and also oversee a lot of our year-end statements that we send out to clients. Before this, I was actually on the client side, so I've gotten to see kind of both worlds from my past experience. So I was a client for 3.5 years, and I led a team at a large healthcare nonprofit, and we went through 13 database migration into one database and then worked through the optimization project that they're still continuing with us. So,
Wonderful. And we're so excited, Denise, that you loved us enough that you wanted to be part of the team.
yeah.
Okay, so while we're waiting for some questions, which please pop those into the Q&A box, I'm going to throw some out just about this year end time. So first of all, the other thing that we see beyond gift processing this time of year, of course, is people who start to ask about year end reporting and getting those numbers. So beyond just total dollars raised, which of course is kind of a gimme and what people would want to see, what other metrics do people typically ask for this time of year? And any helpful hints or any pitfalls to avoid? And Steph, we'll start with you since you're a veteran.
Sure. I think a lot of the questions that you get might depend on the kind of organization you work for and the programs that you do. One that I know comes up all the time is, did we lose any donors? Did we get any new donors? So looking a lot at new donors, retention rate, recapture rate, your LYBUNTs, your SYBUNTs, all of those pieces. And I think one thing that feeds into those reports that's always really important is to get your duplicates under control, which I know we've already had an entire hour conversation on that. So I won't revisit that. But, I think that's one of those where sometimes if all of a sudden you see, oh, we've got a whole bunch of new donors to this, this event or this fund or whatever that looks like. Were they new? Did they just get added new to your database? I'll talk mostly Razor's Edge, but I know we've got people on this call too that might be using other systems. But um, you know, get your duplicates under control, especially if you're looking at a smaller donor volume. A dozen extra might throw off your retention rates, significantly. But the retention rate is one that I always see a lot, and I think that helps shape what your processes are for next year. It's always a lot easier and cheaper to keep someone giving with you than to find someone new, to go through your acquisition list. So the retention's always a big one. As kind of a data nerd who started more in the annual fund side of things, that was usually my favorite one that I looked at because you could learn so much and it gave you a really good excuse to really dig into all the data. So the retention rate's a big one. And I think with that too, if you've got a robust annual giving program or direct mail program, not just looking at your total dollars, but really digging down into like the different segments and what do those look like versus, asking for more money. One of the ones we did was, your gift string. Does it work better if you go low to high or high to low for your, and so kind of digging into that thing. The end of the year is when you start to get a lot of data to really play with. So
Absolutely. Denise, what do you think?
I would add on the prospect side of things, like looking at actions, looking at overall performance. Also, another piece that I think is important for different organizations is being able to measure the impact. So we raised this much money, but how did it impact the organization overall, and also getting ready for any annual reports. So making sure the data can drive that conversation and really showing the impact that the donations made.
I think that gets forgotten a lot in the year-end conversations. I think that's a really important one. We do have a question. So this is, how do you handle year-end statements? Some, for example, don't need tax receipts, donor advised funds. Do you have reports set up specifically for these types of donors? The other example is employer giving. Or is this handled within the document merge itself? So do you guys want me to take this one?
I do, since you're our word merge and everything. I think I might have thoughts too, but I want to hear your
Yeah,
answer
oh,
first.
I will pass it around, don't you worry. So I also actually handle year-end statements for a lot of our clients, whether it's helping them work through them or actually producing it for them. It's something we love to do and are happy to do for our clients. And the answer is it's going to depend on how you've handled that data throughout the year, and you being kind of the collective view, within your team, because you never know, depending on how your access is set up, who's doing what in your database. For anyone who came to our AI webinar, my motto is trust but verify. So, if you've been consistently using something like gift subtype to track a donor advised fund, or maybe you have it as an attribute, you'll be able to, in your export, and you're going to want to use an export just so you can get the, really dialed in mailing addresses, things like that. Use that. I would still do that. I would still say, though, once you get that data out, with the example of a donor advised fund, also make sure that you're exporting the soft credits, but tagging them in such a way you can kind of tell who goes with what. Using the gift ID is a great way to do that. Because you just want to make sure that somebody didn't forget to put that donor advised fund on a gift. And so then you can, first of all, easily pull out if it's the subtype or the attribute, but then go through and see if there's any where you see that fidelity's in there, search to see, is that gift ID married up to a soft credit somewhere that you might want to investigate. So I know it's a big task if you have a lot of these, but it's really worth it to do things like that. The same with employer giving. I'm assuming you're talking about matching gifts. And so, hopefully there you can just use the gift type of matching gift, pay cash, and pull all of those out. Other things that we look at, typically people are really just looking at their recurring gifts for the year, because hopefully for those other gifts, you've been sending out your acknowledgments, receipts, whatever you're calling them, throughout the year. And then don't need to worry about it, as much for year end. So maybe just handling those recurring gifts. And if you have any large donors that you want to give the warm and fuzzies to, you can do those then. But so that was a very long way of saying, filter out what you can, know your data really well, and then just go through it with a fine tooth comb before you do that. When you talked about letting the merge do the work, I would let the spreadsheet do
Yes.
the work. Make sure you have clean data before you're doing the conditional merging.
Mhm.
Denise, do you have any other thoughts on there? Anything I missed?
The data will drive what you do in the end of it. But one of the biggest things with any data project that I pull out, I always go to find one of those most complicated donors, one that I know hits the criteria, one that should not hit the criteria that I know of, and verify that way. So if you know one of your biggest donor advised fund donors or anybody that's linked to them, go look at their records, see how it's done, and then also verify in the export that you pulled out that it's pulling the exact way that you want to do. A lot of times soft credits are involved and soft credits can get tricky, so I always double verify those.
Trust but verify.
Yep.
Steph, right you.
Same thing there too. I think everybody knows at your org who those donors are that kind of always throw off all your data. or who will be the first ones to call and tell you that something is wrong if it's wrong. So like Denise said, to kind of pick one or two of those that you know for sure might, come out on your report differently. The other thing is include way more information than you think you're going to ever need on
Mhm.
that export, because the worst thing you have to do is go back in and start from scratch and re-pull it. So there's things that I'll pull and will have, former coworkers or now, but do we really need that? I don't know, but I might. Or one time 3 years ago I needed it, so I want it on that list. Um, and then I also think that I think we treat them when we run them for clients here, we treat them very much as tax statements. That being said, I do know that some orgs really view it as a stewardship piece that celebrates their entire giving, you know, their entire contribution and everything. And so make sure you know which one it is that your either leadership wants or your donors want, and your donors. And if it's going to be one that, they're going to call and say, and Marlise, I went somewhere different with the employee giving, and I'm wondering if that's more like the giving, where you get the check from the organization. And so it's not made directly to you, but you're still recording it in Razor's Edge. If you don't include those maybe on their giving history, is the donor going to call and say, did you not get that gift from me? Same with DAFs. So figuring it out what that is and making sure that your letter explains, you may have either these
Mhm.
are only gifts that were received by so and so organization, or on the flip side, you may see other giving associated with your support to organization that you may have already received a tax credit, a tax receipt for. Just kind of covering yourself on that one and making sure that the donor knows, hey, you're still going to get questions, but I think if you can be upfront on, yes, we know you may have already gotten a receipt for this, but we still want to celebrate this support that you gave us versus these are only the gifts that we can tax receipt you for. So just kind of keep that in mind before you start pulling the data, things like that. So I like to, on a very strategic level, if at all possible, I like to have like the letter on the front and the gift detail on the back. And that is based off of a few very bad experiences of letter and gift list not getting matched up correctly by volunteers. So anything like that you can do to take a little extra work off your plate too is good. So just kind of think through what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a great point, Steph. And yeah, especially your point about if these are just going to be recurring gifts or payroll. If also the other thing with employees, if these were payroll donations made by your organization's
Mm-hmm.
staff, you want to send out a year-end statement for those.
Yeah.
What I see a lot of people do is at the bottom of the letter where the no goods or services language is maybe also having that asterisk stuff. And this is kind of what you were talking about, saying, this represents recurring gifts. Or if you are doing a more broad statement, this does not include gifts from donor advised funds, anything like that, just so it's very clear. So, yeah, thank you, Steph, for reminding me
Mhm.
about that. This kind of leads us into another question that we just got, which is, do you use a certain template for year-end tax letter? So I see two different types typically, because if we're the ones driving this for our clients, we use whatever letter they want to use. The one type is total giving, through recurring gifts, for example. So this will just be a straight up letter, looks very much like your typical acknowledgement letter. So it'll say, thank you for your support this year through your monthly recurring or quarterly recurring or whatever, which is an exportable field. Um, you have given X amount in 2025.
Mhm.
So that's one way of doing it. It's nice, it's clean. If you think your donors are going to be good with that, that absolutely works. We do, however, I'd say more than half of our clients do a more itemized list, and this is sort of what Steph was alluding to. So that can take two forms. They could have the total still in kind of the body of the letter, and then, yeah, see back. It depends on how long your letter is. So we have a lot of organizations that can actually fit letter and chart with some strategy, you can get it in there.
I'm impressed. The one I'm used to was we had a lot of or a lot of employee giving. So and a lot of them split their gifts. So we had to fit typically at
Oh,
least 52 gifts.
right. Yeah, that can get tricky. If you have those, yeah, the weekly or the bi-weekly. If it's mostly monthly,
Yeah.
you can do this and just do a table. Um, and the one thing I do like to do with the table, if possible, is maybe use some conditions in there, just so that you don't end up, like, let's say you lay out, I'm gonna use monthly for an example, so um, we'll say 14 cell table, because you might have, for a date and amount, maybe. Fund if you want to include it. But let's say that this person is only given, X number of months. You can put conditions in there, that could shorten up the table if you wanted it to. So again, that just depends on how kind of in the weeds you want to get with that, how much you love playing with word coding. Um, those are sort of some of your options there with the letters. And if you're going to do email, I'd suggest sending a PDF attachment, instead of trying to do something in the body of an email. First of all, just make it easier for them to print out something official looking to give, over to their tax advisor or to use themselves if they're doing their taxes,
Mhm.
instead of trying to kind of cheat the body of the email. Okay, so another question about the end of your tax letter. So, and this gets into the email or snail mail. So, how many are we seeing sent out via email or snail mail? I'm leaning towards email to do as many as possible, but want to make sure you're not the only one out there. You are not the only one out there. We do tend to see the balance of them really are being done by snail mail, but I think that's starting to change. And, I just think as long as you're attaching that PDF, you're good to go with email. You know your donors. So, if your donors are fairly active via email, and it's going to get to them and not, get stuck in spam somewhere, I say go for it. Absolutely. If you are more comfortable still doing them by snail mail, that's absolutely fine as well. I think, you know your donors and you know what they'll open. It won't just get chucked to the side or digitally chucked to the side.
I think
Okay.
a point with
Mhm.
that too,
Yeah.
is it's a little extra work, but if you're trying to save on postage costs or, whatever that looks like, look at how your donors gave too.
Mhm.
I think that's a big draw in your general receipts at gift time too, is if you've got people who are only making their gifts online,
Mhm.
they might prefer, which is me. Like I make my gifts online. If you send me something in the mail, it's getting lost in a pile. If you send it to me in an email, my receipt, which then, also could be your year-end tax statement, if you send it to me in an email, I can go save and it's not going to get lost in a pile of, my kids' artwork and the 1,000 papers coming home at year end, for school years too. And so, kind of like Melissa said, your donors. If you know you've got major donors that might have, I don't have someone doing my taxes for me, but if I have someone who owns a business and probably has a great filing system for all of their paper and receipts anyway, they're probably more likely to want a paper receipt too. The other thing you can do is put a statement at the end that says, if you'd prefer to receive a paper copy of this, please reach out to so and so.
Mhm.
Like always give an opportunity for them to reach out to you because I think that can get overwhelming sometimes, but the people who do that are really only going to do it if it matters to them. And it gives you a great chance to have that conversation with them too on how they want to be communicated with. And then, okay, this person from now on should probably always get a paper statement, or this person from now on has said, I don't want mail from you, just email it to me. And make sure that you code that correctly too, so that next year as well. But, I do think of all the mail that people receive, I think their tax statement is one that they are likely to save and open and keep. So, I've even done things where like maybe the envelope or says, like tax statement enclosed, or above their name in the address block, it says like your 2025 tax statement is enclosed. We used to joke that we knew that was the one envelope that was always getting opened by donors. So, yeah, just kind of think through how your donors typically interact with you too.
I want to go
I
back
would
to something in that. Oh, so go ahead, Denise. Yeah.
I was just gonna say I would feed off that on anybody that's assigned or potential
Hmm.
prospects of a major gift. It's a
Mhm.
great opportunity to have a touch point, a stewardship point, anything like that you can add in on the portfolio side too, and add an action to the record. Kind of track that touch point is a benefit for the
Yeah.
future of how they want to receive that information too.
That's excellent. I want to go back to the data for a second because something kind of occurred to me as we've been talking through all of this. And depending on your organization and who's entering, and if you know whether your data is really tight or really chaotic. I'm going to say if you know your data is chaotic, I'm actually going to say export all the gifts for the year
Yep.
into your spreadsheet and then pull out what doesn't need to be merged. But that way you can really dig through and find, oh, I thought that this was just a pledge, but it's actually a recurring gift and we have not been receiving all year. Or, oh, this was supposed to be a donor advised fund, but it wasn't coded that way. Or so if you know that your data is just crazy, I'd say export everything into a spreadsheet, maybe even give yourself a buffer of going back to December of,
Yeah.
24, and
I
do that.
think that's a good point too on the dates. And are you coding your dates correctly for those year-end gifts that maybe, are postmarked 12/30, but got entered on 1/5 or something like that, because they should be receipted for the last year. So make sure you're not accidentally pulling them into, make sure if it's a January 5th, 2025 date, but it was postmarked in December of 2024. I'm like, how far back am I going here? Make sure you don't include them in your statement for this year.
Mhm. Yeah, I know Denise, where you came from, there were just a lot of entities kind of involved there. So I'm sure that data it could get pretty chaotic. Do you kind of have any thoughts around that?
We use the gift coding to like splice it out. So we pulled it on total location giving, and that each location would have their own mail merge and own piece of that, to make sure that it was affiliate specific and also, but we also made sure that the gift coding was done in a way that we could pull the data as one, but then splice it out. So we weren't doing 13 different data pulls in order to get the one year-end statement kind of merged.
Okay. Okay. So just one last thing to say, and we usually try to keep this very, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but if you're hitting the end of the year and you are feeling like this is going to be impossible or you're stressing, please reach out to us, and have a conversation with us. Just know that we are here as a resource for you. Okay, so this is a great question. Once a list of new donors or LYBUNT donors has been crafted or created, now what? Is it just recognizing that or celebrating prospective donors with end of year emails, note cards to them specifically? Are there other stewardship things you've recommended or have seen? So Denise, you kind of talked about stewardship a little bit with thinking about, prospects and things like that. Do you want to jump on this one first?
So one of the ways that I always use this with my major gift officers was if we had someone that was a potential larger prospect, identifying them out of the list and having someone actual have a touch point with them. So driving an actual, action, moving, trying to figure out if they are qualified or what their next step would be as a donor. And then also like anytime I could get gift officers to pick up a phone or do anything else to help feed our data and provide it in a meaningful way, stewardship wise, I encouraged it. So if it was providing them that list and they took, 5, 10 names at the end of the year that they were going to do, I was happy with that. If they were going to send out handwritten notes with the year-end statement, I was happy with that. So any type of stewardship touch point, I always encouraged because we had the data ready for you. So now use it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, Steph, what do you think?
Yeah, same there too. I think I'm used to fundraisers, gift officers, whatever you're calling them. To they're always kind of looking for an excuse to pick up the phone and call a donor too. So I think this is a great chance for them to do it. Um, the LYBUNT report, which I'll just last year, but unfortunately not this year. I probably shouldn't assume everyone knows what that is here. But so those people who used to give to you but haven't yet this year, I should say that's probably a report you should run before your year end is over. But in the maybe a month out, end of December or end of November going into December, it's a really great touch point for your fundraisers to know, or your annual giving, or whoever's doing it. Hey, these people used to be really engaged. They haven't yet. Maybe it's a quick, it doesn't have to be a hard ask either, but it's just an email saying, hey, wanted to let you know of all the great things your gift last year did to this organization. Just a don't forget about us, we're here kind of touch point. And so it's a great place again to identify those. For me, on the annual giving, annual fund kind of side of things, those are people that we might try targeting a little bit different next year. So maybe it's a lower ask amount in case, maybe they always gave 100. And so then this year we asked them for 200, thinking we could upgrade them, and they didn't give it all. They're even a non-response is still a data point for you. So then maybe you go back to asking them for what they used to give, or even a little bit less. Sometimes it's let's just make sure we don't lose them completely. So what can we do to get them re-engaged? Um, I also think new donors are always worthy of some sort of acknowledgement that they're new. That comes with a caveat that you need to make sure they're actually new and not someone that, you just entered into your system because you didn't find a duplicate. Because that happens too. But so I think recognizing them, and in an ideal world, you've got some kind of welcome series set up so they can learn more about your organization, things like that. But that's typically how I would have handled, new donors or those kind of LYBUNT, SYBUNT donors. Sort of one last, maybe let's try something totally different. They didn't respond for 2 years. What can we throw at them this time? One last chance to keep them engaged. And if not, that's fine too. And I'm typically a fan of putting something in there that says, if you don't wish to receive these communications from us anymore, there's an unsubscribe button, but something like that, because again, them opting out is valuable information too. If they're not going to give to you again, like I'd rather know that. So, yeah, just kind of knowing that you might need to talk to them a little bit differently if they used to give year over year and then stopped. So,
And the one thing that you could do throughout the year with your live on, so it's not necessarily a huge rush at the end, not that it wouldn't be
yeah,
a bad thing to have that touch point, but you would be able to set up a workflow within NXT by creating a list of, when someone is a year, it's now past a year
like an
from their
anniversary of your
last
last gift
date.
kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, the anniversary plus maybe plus one of their last
Yeah,
gift, something like that. But you could set up the workflow so that an email automatically goes
yeah.
to them. And so that way that stewardship is sort of happening for you. And then you can just kind of keep track of the metrics and see, does that help? I'd say do it. I'd probably say do it for at least 2 years to get really good data. Don't just rely on 1 year and say,
Yeah.
it didn't work. But that I think would be a really great way to use the NXT workflows to help you. But at the same time, you don't have to think about it, set it up and let it go. The other thing at places that I've worked in fundraising, depending on the kind of board you have, having your board members or committee members, if you have
Yes.
maybe a specific fundraising committee, having them make some year-end, thank you calls or outreach calls is a really, really great way to get them involved. So I think that's really great. And I love a postcard. I actually still have to do them at kind of off times, like Valentine's Day, we love our donors type thing. And if your mission involves anything with kids, having kids art for that postcard is just awesome. And donors love those. They will save those postcards. So I think thinking about stewardship at year end is great, but also think about those weird times. If you're an environmental group, Arbor Day, send out a postcard by all means. Just think about those times of the year when you can do something special for your donors. But postcards are quick and easy to do.
Mhm.
Okay. Someone asked also in the questions about can you see the past webinars? And you absolutely can. So I'm going to put in just a quick plug for that. So if you go to our website, which is donordatabaseexperts.com, we have a knowledge hub. And so if you go to the knowledge hub, all of the past webinars are on there. So you can check them all out there. Okay. So someone said that I mentioned about using the gift subtype to indicate DAF and gift type for matching gift. What else do you use gift and gift subtype for. So Steph, do you want to start and we can round robin this one?
Sure. So my first answer is if you are integrated at all with Financial Edge or doing anything with your GL distribution, that drives basically all of your decisions here. As if you're using FE, you know this already, but that GL distribution tab on your funds, the only options you have to map to those are your gift type and your gift subtype. So think through that and how that matters. What we typically see that used for and what we recommend is either things like that, like a donor advised fund could be there. The other way that I've seen it used pretty frequently is like how a gift came into you. So maybe BBMS is one, or whatever your other kind of incoming gift processes are, because what that can do is it can help. Denise, you can fill this in more for me too, because I know you've got a lot more of you've got experience with this too. But it can help fill in like how your both your credit and your debit accounts flow through to your finance system. So that can help with your reconciling a lot. So that's my higher level, even than FE specific, is what do you need there to help drive your reconciling? That's what I've seen a lot, like, BBMS, cash, check, things like that. I know, just to throw it out there, because I've had these conversations before too. Sometimes you need to have a cash gift subtype, even if it seems redundant to the cash gift type, because you need to make that field required. So sometimes you need one like that too. I'm trying to think, what else do we normally have there? BBMS, I've worked places where maybe there's very specific um coding for, whether it comes in from a foundation or maybe from the government, and it actually goes into a different account on the finance side. And maybe it's not a specific fund every time. So you might need a gift subtype for government, because then behind the scenes, the system can know, okay, it came into I worked at a healthcare organization, so it came into my cancer research, fund, and it was from a government. So it needs to go into this very specific fund on the finance side. So reconciling is my answer, I guess, overall for gift subtype.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how
'cause
I
yeah,
typically
go ahead, Denise.
As I say, that's how I typically use gift subtype is what is the easiest way to help the accountants if there's any reconciling errors or variances, like what can drive that to be found the fastest. So if it's payroll deducts, if it's, your cash account, if it's your pledge receivable, where are you off? And that eliminates half your gifts, three-fourths of your gifts, because you can find the ones that you're on and ones that you're off. So reconciling is the biggest place that I use gift subtype for.
Yeah, yeah. So even like ACH, things like that. Yeah, for sure. And in terms of gift type, which the question asker did ask about, so gift type's kind of hard baked. And that's your cash, which is called one-time gift in NXT. And then also, pledge, pay cash, which when you're entering the gift, you can't pick pay cash. It's only when you link to a pledge that it on committing turns into pay cash. But matching gifts, stock property, sold stock property. If you have the planned gift module, a planned gift is in there. So the gift type itself is actually pretty hard baked into Razor's Edge. Um, Great. Okay. So since you mentioned USN processing, I had a question about checks. Oh God, it's the date question, guys. It's the date question. If a
I was
check
wondering who wanted to take that one on.
Um, the entire audience just shuddered. So we're glad this was asked. If a check is dated in December but received and deposited in January, what is the best practice for entering the gift date? Should it be the check date or the deposit date? From a donor perspective, they may expect to receive their tax receipt for December, but if acknowledgments and tax letters are generated based on the gift date, and the date entered is that deposit date, they would not receive a year-end tax letter. Denise, I'm going to throw this to you first.
So what I say is year end is always a little different for when you're processing gifts. So I always go based off of the postmark date and make sure that anything postmarked December 31st or before is entered. Most of the time I have 10, 15 batches at some organizations dated December 31st so that they are hitting the correct year for their tax receipt. Credit cards, some IRA gifts are a little different, but those get really specific and you have to look kind of deep into documentation with those, but I always go based on the postmark date. Anybody that I work with at the gift processing side, at the end of the year, scan your
Yes.
envelopes, scan check and envelopes so that you always have the documentation, because some people may date the check as December 31st, but not get it in the mail till sometimes even the middle of January. But you can't then technically process that with a January date. So keep the postmark available for you as documentation and backup for how you handle those gifts, because anything postmarked with December, you definitely want to have this December in 2025 so that they do pull on those tax receipts.
And Steph, how about you?
Same thing. I mean, I think the easiest way to explain it from a high level, which was for me often more for like with the fundraisers than necessarily with the donors, when they might want to backdate or forward, to count for different things, was there's a lot of, asterisks and nitty gritty to this, but it's basically, when did the money leave the control of the donor? So they put the check in the mail. Yeah, they could cancel the check, whatever. We'll ignore that. But, they put the check in the mail. The post office now owns that check as of that date. Like, that's what the postmark date is, what you're using is, it's out of the donor's control at this point. Same with, when did the credit card payment go through? IRA or stock transfers. We all know stock transfers sometimes take a day, especially to sell them. The next day you sell them and things like that. But if they initiated that transfer on the 31st, it's out of their control on that day. So that's the day they get credit for it. If you ever have a donor, which I'm sure you will, and we all have, that really, really gets nitpicky with it, you can always, say, check received on this date, to check dated this date, received to our office on this date. And what happens beyond that is between them and the IRS. You can only give the facts. So, but always start with, post date if they drop it off in person at your office on the 31st. I would make sure that, maybe someone in the office is like stamping it on that date, or you've got some sort of documentation of when the check became in your possession versus deposited. In full transparency, the date you deposited in the bank really doesn't matter to the IRS or to, for that. It might matter to your finance team as far as how you account for it, on your side. But from a receipting perspective, it doesn't matter. And I don't know about you guys, but I think a couple of years ago here in Minnesota, we were getting stuff like well into the third week of December. There was one year where it was really bad, and we were like, okay, we can close. No, we can't. There's still things coming through. And, if you do BREs for your, the prepaid envelopes, the post office technically can hold them and lower priority them over first class mail. So sometimes all of a sudden it's, the 20th of January, and here's a big pile of year-end checks that come through. So, yeah, the deposit date doesn't really matter for checks. So
That's I think a really great point, because while the data in Razor's Edge
yes.
really needs to be donor centric, because you're producing those acknowledgement receipts for your donors, and that has to have the information they need for the IRS. However, there's always that constant kind of tug of war, hopefully a friendly one, with the finance department. I mean, I love finance departments, actually. They kind of speak my language. But there's always that tug of war about using the deposit date as that gift date. And there's times that aligns great and times that it doesn't. So can you guys give any kind of helpful hints around that? And Denise, I'm again going to start with you. I'm not picking on Denise. She's just really good with the finance stuff. Not this stuff isn't, but it's actually like her
Nope.
thing.
I often go, Denise, that's you. You answer that, please.
So a lot of times I also recommend, like, anytime getting closer to year end, doing like an initial reconciliation, maybe the 21st, 22nd, like in that a week or so before, so that you tie out so that the fuzziness of the year end is not so fuzzy. Like, you have a clear, like, you cleaned up the gift processing, you cleaned up everything, like, as of if there was any reconciling items before the last week of December, because it does get fuzzy once those year end gifts come in at the end of the year, also having clear communication with your accounting team, making sure that you're on the same page. You want to be best friends with your accountants. You want to get them so that you're on the same page. You want to work closely with them. You can't living siloed both sides ends up with a lot of confusion and reconciling problems, in my opinion. So I think just staying very clear and staying in constant contact with the accountants and saying, yes, this piece, how do you want us to handle taking it to the bank? Do you want it separate deposits so that it's very
Oh,
clear
that's a
that
good
these
point.
were ones dated December 31st, it should tie out to this batch? Or do you want them all together? Like, how do you want us to handle this, and how can we help make your life easier, but also make our lives easier to make sure that we're honoring the donor's intent and the time frame?
That's really great. Steph, you think?
I think that was a great point that I'm glad you mentioned it too, is, when you reach kind of like the end of that first week in January, I feel like you start getting checks that might be postmarked on, in the new year, and some that are postmarked in the prior year, and separating them out into different deposits, because, separate batches. So you might have a 1/5, 2025 batch, and a 1/5 2026 batch. And so that when you are reconciling out to to your bank statement, that, okay, this entire batch actually was 2025 postmarked. And the other part of that too is that kind of flows into this is just document the crap out of everything. Anything that doesn't quite, fit into your normal process, or, I fundraiser goes, oh shoot, it's the 10th of January. I forgot to tell you I picked up this check from so and so, or they dropped it off on 12/31. Great. Can you just send me an email explaining what happened, so I've got that proof, that backup, in case someone asks why this didn't get coded in 2026? Because without fail, those will be the ones that your auditor pulls. So, just document everything that you've got out there. And like Denise said, just stay in really great contact with your accounting team. They're usually happy, in my experience, have been happy to kind of help you figure out the best way to code things so that they flow through correctly. And you get to capture both what you need on your financial reporting side and also on the donor recognition side. So it's
I
kind
would
of a
also add
back and
that
forth.
I've made recommendations to anybody that checks might get dropped off at different locations or any. We used to, at our healthcare organization, people would hand it, at the admin, like when they would walk in, or, there would be checks in people's desk. Send out kind of an all staff email that says, please check your desk. Don't forget, these need to get over to the foundation, or, get them to this area by the end of the year, just to try to kind of spur people that might forget that they have a
Mhm.
check, and remind them that get it over to you.
Please don't hold your checks
Yeah,
in your
please,
desk.
Yeah.
please don't.
Even if it locks, just bring it down to us right away, please.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and on
And
that
people
large,
usually are like, I don't want to hold on to it, take it from me. But
right?
Yeah.
It's like the hot potato. Yeah, and on that larger point that we've all been talking about with the finance team, because I've come into organizations where, that was already a toxic hot mess, and honestly, be the change you want to see. If you're in that situation, be the one to make peace, because having your finance team backing you and they're frankly an auxiliary part of, the development department. So if I could just put in a plug to, yeah, make peace with the finance team, because they're super important to you and can be super helpful. So, okay. So we have another one around gift dates. So let's go with that one. So when reconciling BBMS gifts, we use the date the donor made the online gift as the gift date. Yep. And the disbursement date, from BBMS as the receipt date. This approach allows us to acknowledge gifts in a timely manner and send receipts appropriately, has been agreed upon with our finance team. Similar approach might be helpful in this case as well. So I just want to make sure I understand with the receipt date, that you're not using that receipt date, when you reach out to your donor, and say, this is when we got it. If that's just more, you're just kind of using that as a field. So I'm going to make that assumption, because it seems like a very knowledgeable question. So yeah, so what the person here is positing is the gift date is the date it came in, which is the gift date, And then, basically, how do you track a disbursement date? They're saying they use the receipt date. So what things have you seen? Are you tracking the disbursement date? What have you seen for that? So Steph, any experience around that?
I thought you were calling Stephanie, me Stephanie, and I was getting in trouble.
I would not. I would never.
Um, yeah, the BBMS ones are always tricky. I think what has worked best, I've never done that. I think if it works for your organization, it makes sense. Receipt date, like you said, as long as that's not the receipt date is just being used internally. Um, I have seen orgs do it on an attribute or custom field, which can get tricky. In my experience, the best way to kind of handle that reconciling with BBMS without adding another layer of detail on it, is to make sure that every batch you do has only one, disbursement in it as much as you can. Obviously, the ACH delay throws some confusion into that mix, but typically how I've done it is, once we see what hits the bank account, like, okay, there's $25,000 hit the bank account on this day. You can go back then and say, okay, that $25,000 is represented by these 8 batches that add up to $28,000 minus the $3,000 in fees or whatever. So my experience is just constantly tying that back to the batch number, which can get tricky though, because you do get credit cards and ACH in the same batches and things like that. So I have worked with orgs that would always, put their ACH in a separate batch from their credit cards for just that reason, even if it was online from BBMS, which gets tricky, obviously, too, for a variety of reasons. But yeah, that's our.
This is when I would plug that gift subtype
Yeah,
too of
yeah,
BBMS
absolutely.
as the gift subtype, because then you can easily identify those BBMS ones that should line up minus
Yep.
fees with your bank account. So.
Mhm. Great.
I have
Okay.
also, when I worked somewhere that very much required that gift subtype to be used in a very specific way, that I have also added it as like a credit, like on the reference or like in the, the pay method, like something in there too to tie out to BBMS. Or making sure on the flip side that where there was a credit card, they were only BBMS ones, not like from, one cause or somewhere else. So you could also pull on that if you need to. But a subtype would be much cleaner.
So this question is someone who's looking to the future. I love it. So as we're looking into 2026, we are creating budget raise revenue goals. Any best practices when entering and going into that new new fiscal year, for what kind of raised revenue you're tracking? For example, revenue from church donations, government, from grants, from individuals, board members. Do you itemize your goals this far? Yeah, so basically, when you're planning those goals, how are you kind of breaking them out? How are you sort of what sub goals, I guess? What are you looking at? So Steph, any thoughts
Yeah,
on
I think it depends on your
goals?
organization and what you need to track. I at one point worked for an organization that had actually had very specific revenue goals around church donations, because of the outreach we did and the work that they supported. So, it can be that's actually the place that church was a gift subtype because they went to a different fund on the like a different account on the finance side. So that's kind of one extreme. But I would say I think what you want is to be able to dig down into your data in the way that's most meaningful to your organization. So especially if you have solicitation strategies around your church donations, then yes, absolutely track it that far and make sure that you have an appeal or a fund or something that will roll up into those so that when someone, in February goes, hey, how much have we gotten from church donations? You know how to pull that information. Is it they all go to one appeal? Is it that they all go to, a specific fund, which might not make sense in that case, or is it that they went to, I don't know what else it would be. Appeals where my mind keeps going, or is it something on the constituent side that you can track it? Is it that is it that the donation came from a church event or is it that it came from a church? And what does that look like? So just thinking through as you set these up that how you're going to pull that information later. So maybe it is, a constituent code that you can look at for business versus individual. We don't typically recommend like church as a separate constituent code. But if that's something that you are is very integral to your organization, it could make sense to do that too. Same with like government, things like that if you do a lot of grants. So think through how your data is currently set up, how it needs to be set up, and make sure that that's an ongoing thing so that as you pull the data this year, you can also look back and see like, okay, what did we do the last few years? Is this a reasonable goal or not?
Denise, have you seen some goals broken out?
That's one of the biggest things. No matter how the goals are broken out, I always start with that as like, what is driving that and the information
Mm,
and the data that I can actually produce a report on it. So then if I have the goals in a spreadsheet outside the system, but what coding in the system is going to drive to get me the results. So I don't ever want to make a decision siloed and make it so that it is so specific for one exact report, but also that we can pull bigger reports and narrow down reports so that you're making those reporting and the coding decisions so that you can get holistic and detailed views of the organization. So no matter what your goal is, your KPI that you're measuring, just making sure that the coding is done in a consistent way, that you can actually pull it out and report on it. And one of the things that I like to do is if there is a new KPI that anybody in leadership is talking about, I like to see if I could pull it for the previous year. Can I already pull that in the data? If I can't, why can't I? And what reporting or what coding do I need to change? And also making sure that it's sustainable with the organization over time. Trying not to make decisions, knee jerk, like we have to change everything. Let's make sure that we're making this as a holistic approach, making sure that you can drive down and get your holistic view and your detailed view.
I think off of that too is why do you want this and how are you going to use it? Because they might say, hey, I want this data point, and it's just because, someone told them it was a good data point to use, or it's something that they saw, in a report one time. And what I've noticed, it's the same as like when you have to pull lists or queries, it's why, how are you going to use it, and are you going to want it again? And that can drive like, they might say, oh, I need this retention specific to this. And I go, okay, well, I'm already pulling this, this, and this. Does that work? Oh, yeah, that's fine too. So before you kind of have to reinvent the whole data structure, like, is there something you're already pulling? Is it a story your data can already tell before you start from scratch on another coding project or whatever?
I think too, it also depends on how integrated, you are with your organization's actual budget. What are the line items?
Yeah.
So, for example, I've worked places where bequests were a line item, which don't try to think about it too much. But also things like the gala was a line item, and so those goals were fairly
Yep.
enshrined. And then there would be maybe a line item for specific restricted funds where you're expected to raise X amount of dollars for. So these goals can encompass anything from looking at individuals, organizations, but also maybe looking at funds, planned gifts being realized, things like that. And you might even have some overlap there. So it can get really, really pretty interesting, but it's a great way to dive into your data and as we've been saying, sort of see what story it tells. So, all right. Denise, any last thoughts as people are going into to year end?
Just congratulations and great work during the year. I think one of the biggest things with year end is seeing the full picture of the year and the hard work that's done at each organization that we work with. I think year end gets to be a busy time, stressful, but when you take a step back and look at the data and look at what has come in and
Mhm.
celebrate what has actually happened.
I think we don't take the time to do that enough as fundraisers, especially this time of year. Great. And Steph.
Yeah, same. And I think also sometimes for those of us that tend to be more on, the operational behind the scenes side, one of the things I used to, love to do when I would have, when I was overseeing a group of gift processors or, database specialists, things like that, is I feel like there's always a lot of celebration, as there should be, around like the dollars that came in and a lot of the major gifts. But one of the things that I would always try to bring up, like in our team meetings as we gave updates on the year, would be, hey, and by the way, I just want to recognize that we entered blank number of gifts. And, of these gifts, those receipts or acknowledgments were out within like 2 or 3 days typically, or a day, even at our highest volume. So just taking a minute to recognize that December isn't crazy and it's busy and there's a lot going on. But, focus on, also being able to recognize like, yeah, we got a couple, huge gifts, but all of these other gifts came into, and that from a gift entry perspective is just as much work, if not sometimes more, if they're new donors that you have to set up. So, yeah, same thing. I think it's December and it's insane. So, I'm glad you guys took an hour to join us too.
Yes, we know how valuable your time is, so we very much appreciate it. As I said, we will be going into the next year doing more of these webinars. So the next one will be on January 27th. So watch your email for the topic, but we have a lot of fun stuff coming up. Of course, there'll be stuff around NXT since that's the hot topic right now with where are we going? What are we doing? What does all of that look like? So be sure to look out for plenty of that. But you'll get an email because you came to this webinar, and it'll have a link, but it will also, you can also reply to that and give us feedback, tell us what we're doing well, what we're not, and give us some topics you want to see, because this is definitely your time.
Yeah, and
So
I think if you have any other questions about your end, if we didn't get to them today, too, feel free to let us know.
yeah, reply to that email. Absolutely. So, all right, wonderful. Well, happy fundraising and congratulations on all the work you're doing, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Marlisa.
Thank you.